Okay, everyone, let's talk a little bit about our next project, which deals with conceptual imaging. You're going to be working on a poster. The poster you'll be working on is going to be social justice related, so some sort of topic in that realm of social justice, okay? But what we'll talk about in this lecture is about conceptual image, and much of the content we'll look at here doesn't necessarily directly connect to social justice. And you can, if you'd like, aside from social justice, if you want to pick something socially related, socially cause related, we can talk about, if you have a specific thing you're passionate about, we can talk about maybe you doing, something that veers a little bit to the left of whatever the project requirements are. But we'll take that as a case-by-case basis. And essentially what you're going to be doing in this poster is, obviously having a clear concept and having an image be the main driver of that concept. You will also incorporate typography. There are going to be, different amounts of type that you can incorporate. You might use one word if your image is really strong. You might use more of a headline and a subhead and a little blurb to call people to action if you're doing something, say, for an organization of some sort. We'll look at some different posters that show both approaches. And again, the topics covered here will consist of a bunch of different types of content, okay? So when we're talking about conceptual imagery, we're essentially talking about using illustration or photos or combinations of the two. You can use collage, you can cut things and make original images. You can pull from existing sources and reconstitute them. But essentially at the end of the day, your goal is to engage a viewer, to pull them in and to make whatever the message is that you're trying to convey really clear, or to convey whatever information it is you're trying to convey. So, it might be for something as simple as an event, or it might be for something that's, again, a cause-related issue that is maybe connected to something as deep as human rights, or gender equality, or discrimination of many different types. So, in that case, you're going to see a variety of approaches, something that's, an image that might be more whimsical to an image that may be harder hitting and, more sobering, okay? But at the end of the day, you're trying to, communicate, maybe advocate, you're trying to capture someone, make them think about something differently, and potentially, eventually even, encourage or change behavior, for the positive. You can use, like I said, something that's more whimsical. You can use humor. You can use something that makes someone emotional. You can go controversial sometimes in imagery. Imagery might make someone feel comfortable or uncomfortable. You can create, symbolism, and you can use visual metaphors, and other types of, even like things like visual illusion, where you're playing tricks with the viewer's eye to, convey an idea. Simple ideas here, but three different approaches to a conceptual imagery driven poster. Something that, again, is more cause related. Okay, the idea of the negative space. Now that's something to really consider, is how the positive and negative space in your imagery play off of each other. And sometimes the most simple posters can be the most effective, okay? Here, that the negative space between the fingers, the upward reaching hands shows that need in a way, and that larger hand shows the assistance of Amnesty International, which is an organization that still exists and was really huge in the 80s and 90s when it came to equal rights and socially related topics, particularly related to wrongful imprisonment or things to do with apartheid in South Africa. And it still exists today and is very, very much an aid-oriented organization, an advocacy-related organization. Totally opposite of that here is a simple film showcase poster, okay? Now this is not cause related, it's not anything other than informational, it's talking about an event. The reason why we're looking at it here though is it's taken this idea of conceptual imagery where you you take one element and you push it together with another element. So you take the visual element of film and you push it together with this visual element of ice cream, and you create this St. Louis Filmmakers Showcase, which is a summertime event in St. Louis. Okay, St. Louis in the summer, pretty hot. And so just a kind of a more playful, fun approach of combining two disparate elements and pushing them together to create new meaning. Here is the assemblage of this dove-oriented image with these elements that are clearly more militaristic. This is by Luba Lukova. She's really excellent at using very minimal content to create a bigger idea. In this case here, the irony of the elements being formed into that bird create a conversation and maybe raise questions. Okay. Here's a poster by James Victore. This is one of the earliest posters he did. He's a well-known designer, and he started out doing a lot of posters, very much cause-related posters. And here's one where he took an existing image of a Native American here and simply hand drew this type in this kind of early 1400s, 1500s, or maybe more 1700s. Start of the U.S. type of something you'd see on the Declaration of Independence, okay, which is ironic here, and simply taking that image, altering it with the type, and then drawing over the Native American's face, you get this idea of this sort of ironic message of celebrate Columbus, and his whole thing here was raising issues of genocide, raising issues of casting aside Native peoples, and really destruction of a culture in many ways, or attempts to, at least. And in these situations, you might say this is a pretty controversial image. It might make people really angry at on either side of the fence here. Some people may be up in arms about, well, why do this, and why have to throw this in our faces, and other people are saying this is real, and this is you're not comfortable with it. Sorry, this is history, right? So. The symbolism of the simple skull, which we see everywhere as an iconic image, says a lot with a very, raw, sort of even hand-drawn approach. Don't be afraid to be really raw and hand-rendered in your imagery, or in your elements, or in your symbolism. Here's another one where we're dealing with visual metaphors. This is the burning butterflies here, famous poster. And just, again, kind of a commemorative or memorial of the nuclear bomb drops from World War II in Hiroshima. And here, something as light and delicate and beautiful as a butterfly, to see those burning and falling to the ground. There's so much cognitive dissonance here. We're used to seeing these things light and weight and flying and moving through the air, and here they are burning and falling to the ground. So it says a lot in just this simple, sort of almost poetic, tweaking of an image we're used to seeing in a totally different way. Here you have this idea of we the people are greater than fear, and this is Shepard Fairey. I'm sure many of you know of his work, and this image here, particularly after September 11th. The fear mongering that was going on towards anyone that was of particularly Muslim or Arabic, or not even that, but anyone that didn't seem to fit the bill of a typical American. There was a lot of fear and concern and really uncool things happening geared towards people who were peace-loving, honest citizens, just like anyone else, but they were just discriminated against based on background. So here he's essentially saying, "Hey, man, we're all the same here," and it's just the idea of using that scarf, that head covering, and incorporating the flag as that element. You're taking again two things that are typically not seen together and pushing them together to say, "Hey, we're one, we're all one, and we're greater than." This fear that's happening. This idea of stopping gun trafficking. Here's a poster now where you're not just incorporating simple imagery. You have a main image here, the pistol created by all the different arrows which talk about, really essentially connect to the idea of trafficking, okay? The routes taken, etc. And so that you have this main element, and then you have a main headline, Stop Gun Trafficking. Now visually, they're pretty equal. It's pretty equal in weight. I mean, Amnesty International is probably the largest thing here. Obviously, the red color is one way to create a sense of hierarchy in the type here. And so it's really just this main image, the headline, essentially a subhead here, okay, which supports the headline here. Some more in-depth information here that would call someone to action, or to raise the more specific points of the issue, and then the organization putting out the poster. Now here I have the question: how important is the gun orientation? Okay, is it if it's facing this way versus that way? What do you think? Why face that way versus to the right? Now to the right tends to have a more almost active orientation, but having it go this way is almost like there's a counter productivity to this. There's this backwards kind of angle, and almost like shooting ourselves in the foot in a way by allowing this to happen. No pun intended there. Okay, so think about whatever your visual item is, which direction is it facing? Subtle tweaks have a big impact. Another James Victoria here. So now type is really driving the whole thing. Now, it's type and image combined, but it's essentially type. And now here's something that is a small sketch, okay, blown up to poster size. And someone like Victoria likes to work in sketches because he feels there's an immediacy that happens that you can't get when you're trying to take it then and overly refine it. So, you see his approach a lot of times is very hand-rendered, very raw. And again, in the context of this message, which is simple, and does it need to say any more? It's that small sketch blown up in size has an immediacy to it that is really nice. So again, stay open when it comes to your visual idea considerations. Sometimes super refined imagery can be great. Sometimes the opposite is true. Okay, so when we're talking about concept development, I mean, essentially, how do we develop strong concepts? And we're all capable of it. And I think it's easy to get impatient because it takes a while sometimes. And essentially, what you need to do is just take the time. Okay, as cheesy as that sounds, hard work. Okay, research, deep understanding of content, a deep dive into the messaging you're trying to create, and the background information. I hate to say it, I see less and less of it, and we need to have a clear understanding of all the information that we can get whenever we're trying to design something, particularly if it's cause related or justice oriented. Okay, so you guys are all capable of it. You just have to have that true desire to nail it and be patient in the process. Speaking of which, now process we may have talked about before, but just to reiterate, this is a design process is a very linear thing. You start with preliminary ideas. You might do word lists and mind maps and hash out ideas, and then you start working small thumbnail sketches. They're literally a couple inches by a couple inches. Don't make a big poster right out of the gate. Even if you're sketching, make them small, keep them really simple. Even just getting visual orientation on the page. If I'm going to incorporate type, where's my main image? Where's my type go? Where's my secondary type element go? Etc. And then you're going to take those and you're going to refine them. Okay, so you took 30 sketches that you did and you started to refine them to maybe 10. And then you took those 10 and you decided, okay, I want to get down to maybe 2 main options now. In your project that you're going to be working on, you're going to want to be dealing with, distilling everything down into 2 possible comps, 2 possible poster directions, which you'll then make a decision on and take one of those and refine it to the final art. Okay, so we have our thumbnails, we have our roughs, and then those are distilled down to comps, and then comps are finally refined, and we get the final artwork here, which is either printed or put online, or in our case, submitted as a PDF. Mind maps, this is something you guys have been working on before, and so you know what they are, but essentially take a central component and then just use all these different branches and go into anything that is related to the main topic. And the idea here is to dig deeper into subcomponents that might have a big impact on potentially a visual idea or a message idea for your poster. Word lists, I'm a big fan of those. You take a main topic, here this was maybe for a poster that had to do with animal welfare, some organizations and some websites and some just starting of some word lists. This is by no means the entire list. This is just the first page of it that a student did in dealing with things that related to animal health and well-being. Okay. We talked about it already with the ice cream cone poster, but this idea of forcing connections, this 1 + 1 = 3, is very important. So you're taking two things that are, they might be familiar by themselves, but you create an unfamiliar context for them to live together. And by pushing, one thing into the next thing, it's almost like the Reese's cup, okay? Chocolate and peanut butter, two separate things, put them together, a whole new thing, right? And so this idea of 1 + 1 = 3 is essentially saying it's more than just the sum of those two things. When you create something new, it transcends those two individual components. Okay, so here's a student that was working on it. This was not a cause-related poster, but this was something for a San Diego Film Festival. And again, that word list starts out with San Diego, anything that relates to San Diego, film, anything that relates to film. And then you're going to take, you might have 10 lists, depending on what your topic is, and you're going to just start to now force connections between these two, okay? So San Diego skyline and the clapboard, the little action click thing, kind of a clunky solution, but again, this is a thumbnail. That's a perfect thumbnail. Raw and type is shown as lines. It's not even, written out. It's just a rough idea. The Coronado Bridge and the strip of film. Okay, that's another potential idea for San Diego Film Festival. Okay, tacos and camera, good combination there. I mean, whenever you put a taco into something, it's going to be better, right? So how can you go wrong? But you see the point. You take these two things and you shove them together to create some new meaning there. Okay, and again, these rough thumbnails. That's what you want in the beginning. Not perfect, not beautiful, just an idea, getting it down on the page. Things like images. This is from a poster you'd see in a bus shelter. This is for The Economist magazine, which you can see here. And people that read, I'm not a reader of The Economist necessarily, I've seen it, but people that read The Economist would know that masthead is, the kind of an iconic design. And, obviously here they're basically saying, hey, read The Economist, be a smarter person, right? And so you're taking this idea of these magazines and tweaking them and shoving them together into this new context to make something new in a very simple message that in this case, the only type you see is found on the actual masthead of the magazine. Okay, nothing else needed. Combining two elements, 1 + 1 = 3. Okay, you have the symbol, the feminine symbol, the female symbol, combined with this raised fist, which is a sense of empowerment. And you get to, you push those together and you have a symbol that was created in maybe the later 60s, in the early 70s, in the women's equality movement and the women's power movement. And, again, a new symbol is formed that becomes the representational symbol of a whole movement, just by combining two things that are unrelated and pushing them together to create something new. Luba Lukova again, when you take this illustration and you combine the kind of this raw hand rendered quality with something that we're very familiar with seeing on packaging, the nutritional information, when you shove that into the image of this this other type of illustration, you get new meaning, and you don't even need to say anything more. I mean, the look on the illustration is enough. And combined with this information, you only need one word to talk about famine in Sudan, right? So again, if you can decide on your poster to go this approach. If you go really minimal with your type, then your image has got to be crushing it in terms of the information, right? And these types of posters almost transcend any kind of intention, and well, they don't transcend it. They're very effective for it, but they almost become art, unto themselves. So it's cool when work can do that, when it can become even more than just the kind of the tool it's being used for. Okay, same thing here. Talking about global warming and loss of habitat, or natural concerns for the environment. You have this idea of the fish scales. You have this imagery. This is a cool combination of photography and illustration in this case. So this idea of the cracked lake bed, or the cracked, not ocean floor, but lake floor, in this sort of dried up components, to use that as the scale for the fish, the dead fish in this case. Again, is an effective combination of styles, number one, or I should say, photo and illustration, but also two disparate things, that may not be pushed together usually, but when you do, they create, again, new meaning. Okay, so essentially you want to consider how your imagery is going to be used. You're also going to want to think about typography, even if you're using only minimal content. If you're using typography or any kind of messaging, you want to think about hierarchy. What's the first read that you want the reader to see? Is there a subhead or a secondary component? And is there a call to action that basically says, hey, to learn more, go here, or become a part of the movement, go here, whatever the messaging is. And essentially at the end of the day, you really want to think about, what's the goal of this thing? What's your intent, man? It's not just about making it look cool. What does it need to accomplish? Okay. Moving right into that, so more conceptual imagery. These are obviously not posters, and they are obviously not cause-oriented, unless you consider perspiration. The need for taking care of. Oh no, these are handy wipes. These aren't. These are some different. These are new slides. These handy wipes. Okay, they look like deodorant for a second, but obviously the image connects to the handy wipes. Okay, so if you've ever eaten a jelly donut or a popsicle, or bomb pop in this particular case, particularly in summer, that these are sticky propositions and messy as hell. So, effective, playful, and definitely more of a commercial example here. But they connect directly to the product. Okay, back to a little more cause-related stuff here. Here's a billboard that's interesting. The way they've set it up. This is for the World Wildlife Fund, talking about ocean sea level rise. And you can see it here at one point in the day. It starts out where that ocean level, it's all done by light and shadow, is low, and through the day it starts to rise, and by the later afternoon it's gone almost to the top there. So an interesting way to engage viewers and to keep them engaged, and also obviously raise a lot of awareness for the cause. And yes, this is a billboard, but and granted, we can't achieve this because we're submitting only online, but still, it's a something to think about. It's a cool idea. Again, another example here with no type, and this one is essentially combining elements here in a very raw illustration to convey this idea of wrongful imprisonment or prison reform. Okay, and particularly in an era of for-profit incarceration, a lack of voice for people that are often put away. This says a lot with very, very little, maybe visually poetic, really interesting, the textural components. This is obviously a hand-rendered poster, or it could be digitally done and still look like this for sure, given all the tools you have. But, this raw textual image looks so much more effective than if this was all very clean lined with very straight edges and very clear cut everything. It would lose a lot of the impact it has here. The era here is pretty clear. Don't be fooled by this number here. That's not the year. I'm sure that you could guess that this is 60s into the 70s. I would hope you'd guess that, knowing the bit of history that we know, particularly about the peace movement and its major ground that it started to take on over the especially the course of the Vietnam War in the mid to late 60s and into the 70s. Peace now was a common phrase, and this dove intermingled with the type, hand rendered all around, 100% painted. And if you want to go that route for yours and you can make it work, that's fine too. But here's a kind of an iconic poster, Peace Now. Pretty much the same exact era, embracingly different. If you may or may not know that peace is a slang term for a weapon, a gun. And in this case, ironically, this was a poster that was created by people that were also against the war, but they were being radicalized in a way because they were so fiercely frustrated and despondent almost over the injustice of the Vietnam War. And that's in the corporate involvement and the layers of issues that were happening during the time, they actually became radicalized almost to the point of being militarized. And they bombed buildings and did these types of things almost as sort of by any means necessary approach. Now, they always called in ahead of time to ensure no one was in the building. They gave warning before they blew things up. But still, the point here is same era, almost like the same want for the end, the end of war, but they're a totally different message and embracingly, almost startlingly different message, just based on switch of an image and a tweaking of the spelling. Okay, if you want to know more, you can look up things like there's a group called the Weather Underground. There's a famous documentary about them. And again, this is that 60s and 70s era. Here's another poster. Typically in this situation, you'd see a lot of propaganda posters where they would say, victory, and you'd have a big gun or a big cannon or something. Here it's just a simple reversal of the bullet, and totally changes the meaning of that term. Okay, we'll have victory when we have peace. So for your project 4, again, you're going to create a concept-driven poster based on a socially related cause or social justice-oriented topic. Okay, so you can start by selecting a topic, thoroughly researching it. Again, choose something you're passionate about. That's going to be important, and we'll talk more about this in the assignment overview in Canvas. Once you've done your research, you begin making concept lists, and then you'll start forcing connections to make thumbnail sketches. Again, by forcing connections, we mean taking those disparate elements and pushing them together to create something new. You'll combine imagery and typography into your final work. And now, again, if you choose to use really minimal typography, that's fine, but the image has got to really drive it. Some of you may incorporate a main message and headline, and then a supportive subhead, and then maybe a call to action. Others might want to go, again, more in that conceptual, almost art-driven direction, where there's a main message and a primary image, and then maybe one word even, like we just saw in some of the examples. Okay. Here's another James Victoria example. The death penalty mocks justice. It's pretty clear what this one's about. And this poster, this final art became what it did, again, from a sketch. He used a final sketch in the artwork. And then, the type was almost a second. Once he was mainly done here, he incorporated the type after that. And it works, in conjunction with this. A lot more content here, a good amount of information provided, in addition to the main headline here, okay, which obviously flows right in line with the skull here, the mocking skull, the sort of tongue wagging skull. Here's I won't go too deep in this, but he talks a little bit about his process to get to the final poster. And again, one thing that's nice to see here is these are his poster thumbnails. And this is what we're looking for in the first phases of your project work, or just thumbnails. This small, this raw, just getting ideas down. Okay, so that's what we're looking for when we're looking for thumbnails. You'll eventually work them into your final artwork, and some of them might become very much refined and totally, digital, or completely painted, or collaged of whatever you want to do. Here you can see that this poster almost becomes the final art, and that image, actually, that sketch, is used here as the final art element. Okay, changed up the type and the composition of the layout, but that was it. These become, it's for Surfrider. It's a socially related organization, environmental organization. Something like that could work if you're interested. Here, these are posters, but they're almost more ad-like in a way, in that they have a central image, a main headline, some clear subhead content there, and then a call to action. Turn the tide on plastic pollution at, blah, blah, blah. That's your call to action there. Okay. Here you see the sushi wrapped in plastic. What goes in the ocean goes in you. Pretty clear message there. Pretty clear here. The idea of cigarette butts flowing into the ocean and into the food chain. This sort of, we are, creating this environment, this issue that's coming right back to us. Okay, that we're then ingesting even. So again, more ad-based. Both of these could work as examples of your poster project as well. Another one in a series, Rise Above Plastics. Hard. These images are hard to look at, and but they say a lot. And this whole idea of this plastic campaign or anti-plastic campaign, simple headline, blurb, and that's it. Find out how you can help. So it's really just a headline and a call to action with this image, which is a sad image. Okay. Totally different here. This is Barbara Kruger. She's a fine artist, but there's always an interesting fine line between her work as art and her work as almost graphic design in a way. And this idea of your body's battleground. This was an 80s era, 80s, maybe early 90s. I'm pretty sure it's 80s. Poster, not even poster, like these large scale works. They were clearly connected to women's rights to choose and the idea of all the politics behind that. And these simple messages, always set in bold, this really like extra bold, Futura, always red and black and white, and really strong messages. But this is something that could be, even though this is an artist creating this as an art piece in a way, there's a lot of commentary here. There's definitely social relation here, and this is a fair approach too. If you'd rather go more this route than say this route, okay, either one is fine. Another one of hers, your comfort is my silence. This could be your silence is my comfort. This leaves a lot of questions asked in this kind of creepy image with the shadowy figure, the face not shown, the type kind of interchanged above and below, almost this cut together. She uses style really sort of just raw, almost like cutout type of type. And this raises a lot of questions, and I wish we could have a full discussion in class about this. What is it saying? And what is it about? Okay, and it obviously connects again to similar issues in the previous one, not necessarily women's right to choose, but other things that with just issues that women deal with a lot, and they shouldn't have to deal with. Okay. Another Shepard Fairey here. This is heading more towards the goofy. Not goofy in a way, sinister, like light and sinister at the same time. Almost this sort of public service copper image with the I'm going to kick your ass, and then the subhead, the subsection here, and get away with it. And then the irony of serve and protect here. This is a pretty visually complex image. With all this textural stuff going on in the background. But some people, if you want to go this route too, and you're really into illustration, want to go deeper, like in terms of the amount of content in the piece, that's fine too. Just make sure that your main message is still clear and your image is really clear. And the last one here, we'll leave off with Shepard. The opposite of some of the others. These are almost just simply, almost poetic in their visual simplicity. While I say that, at the same time, they're very layered. There's a lot going on, but primarily message-wise, you have a central figure, and in this case, you have the word compassion, which you may or may not even need when you see the Dalai Lama here. He's just a figure of peace and compassion. Do we even need these other elements? That's a question. And this one here, this is, I'm guessing this is maybe Angela Davis. If not, it's someone very much similar, as iconic. This idea of equal rights. Again, this is something that harkens back. If you look at the the style going on here, this is harkening back to again that later '60s era, where equal rights and civil rights were one of the hotbed issues. And not much to say here. The image says a lot on its own. Okay. And so those are just some examples to consider for your poster. As review this video and go back and look at some more of those examples. And if you want, I can include this PDF in Canvas for your review. We'll also discuss more in depth the project, and you'll find that in Canvas under Project 4. Okay, just real quick, you're going to have an overview section. That's going to be all of this information here. Okay, it's a lot. And I'm going to make sure, we got to make sure you go through all of it, okay? And you'll hit me up with any questions. We'll have to do a meeting to make sure that everyone's on the same page. That's your overview. That's also where you will submit the final poster, okay? These will be published here shortly. And aside from that, you have a phase 1, which is a selection of videos for you to check out. Video on grids, using grids. And now it's important when you view these videos, there are questions below each of them. You're going to answer them in the, is a text entry here, or in the comments section of this assignment. Just a few quick questions under each video. Watch the videos. If there are any links, check those out, answer the questions. And same with these two videos here. Really short and easy. I just want to make sure that we're clearly grasping the content. Here's a video on typography, using scale and spacing and hierarchy of information, and then image style considerations, video for that as well. Okay, so make sure you check all of those out. After you do that, that's due in about a week. You're also going to do a mood board. Okay, there's not a lot here, but a mood board you're going to essentially show on an 11 by 17 page elements, image ideas, raw sketches, some type ideas, and I'll include some examples of mood boards if you need to. We'll talk about those when we have we'll do a Zoom meeting. And then a process critique is nothing to look at there. That's just going to be you submitting your process work a week before the final due date for us to get any feedback to you and make sure you're ready for the final due date, which is the 22nd, which is our last day of the semester. Okay, so you'll have a bit of time to do this, but it's going to go really, really quickly. And because we're strictly online, we got to make sure we're really on top of this together to ensure that you got what you need and can do the best work you can possibly do. All right. Any questions, let me know, and we'll go from there. Thanks.